A Kiss for a Card. A Miraculous Ladybug, Adrienette, Valentine's Day, Fanfiction, Part 3. So, maybe it didn't work out as well as Adrien was hoping it would. The card looked downright awful. Plagg could not keep his laughs under wraps, and to the point where Adrien had to play music to cover the noise, lest his father or Natalie would notice. Adrien frowned at the attempt to draw him and Marinette. He wasn't the artist one between the two of them, but he had hoped that he wouldn't have been this bad at it. Unfortunately, he was.
You know, I think the worst part is that she's actually gonna like it.
Plagg. Adrien did find solace in knowing that Marinette wouldn't hate the card, hopefully at least, but he wanted it to be at least a bit better for her.
Really though, it's fine. Special and unique, as they say,
Plagg continued. Adrien scowled at him.
You're mocking me, he stated.
Plagg shrugged.
You have other gifts that are good, he said.
Adrien smiled at that. The other gifts would hopefully make up for the disaster of a card. He had spent much more time thinking those over and gathering it. Only the best for his lady. I think she's gonna like them, Adrien said proudly. His Kwame snorted and leaned on his side on the piano.
I don't see how she couldn't, he said.
Adrien smiled. That was about as high of a praise as he could get from Plagg. I'm really excited for tonight, Adrien sighed with a smile. Plagg rolled his eyes.
No, duh. Now go shower and comb your hair. You smell like cheese,
Plagg said, flying and pushing him towards the bathroom. Adrien rolled his eyes. And whose fault is that? He said with a laugh. So, Adrien was strangely nervous. It was strange because at this point he had learned that there was no need to be nervous around Marinette. She had quite literally seen him at his worst. As she had said before, with that brilliant smile on her face, she had seen him scared of the world after being hit by an Akuma and in the most emotionally vulnerable state possible. There was nothing he could do to scare her off. Adrien relished in that knowledge. There was truly nothing that could separate them. No one else had the experiences they had. However, that was more life and death, drastic measures, and in some weird twist of fate, the simple act of giving her a card was with the best attempt he had at drawing their superhero counterparts. Well, somehow that was more nerve-wracking and panic-inducing than putting his life in her hands. How surreal his life was. He'd allow her to put him a foot away from an Akuma blasting fiery shots, with the comfort of knowing that she'd save him by the end of it, and that he was perfectly safe. However, a card that he was mildly embarrassed by? Apparently, that was where the line was drawn. However, that made sense. You look like you have ants in your trousers, Nino commented. Adrien looked at him and smiled slightly. I'm nervous, he said. Nino snorted. Clearly, his friend said sarcastically. What for, though? You didn't do anything, right? Nothing bad? Nino questioned. Adrien shook his head rapidly, and then took out the card he had made for Marinette. There was a blush high on his cheek because, oh God, the drawing really was awful. It was obvious that in their relationship only one of them had artistic abilities. Idly, Adrien thought back to the many times he had heard his father commenting to some staff member, and many times to his own mother that Adrien himself would take over the fashion business one day. Truly, his father would be in for a nasty shock when he found out. Adrien knew and could admit to himself that his attempt at designing and making a suit would end up more like a bandaged Egyptian mummy situation. Bitterly, Adrien internally laughed at that, and at the look on his father's face when he would discover his lack of design talent. Oh well, he had Marinette to make up for that, so his father couldn't be that angry. Oh no, Nino said bluntly. Adrien nodded miserably. Nino closed the card with a grimace. She'll like it. It's clearly you guys. It's a strange style. But she'll like it. You guys like everything you do for each other, Nino said with a trying smile. Adrien shrugged. I've come to terms with the horrendousness of it. Please don't show Alia, though. She'll never let me live it down, Adrien pleaded. Nino motioned, zipping his lips wordlessly, and shoved the card back into his hands. So she doesn't ask, he explained. Hello, hello. Speak of the devil, and he, or she in this case, shall arrive. Alia and Marinette happily skipped up to the boys. Do you have your tickets? The latter asked. Adrien and Nina held up their pink fair tickets. Perfect. With that, Marinette floated over to Adrien's side and wrapped her arms around his, walking closely next to him. This fair is going to be so much fun, she said happily. Adrien smiled down at her. Better than last year? He teased. Marinette laughed. Well, it depends. Nothing can beat what happened last year, but it might be better this time around now that we're actually together. And, oh, because you actually knew what it meant when you asked me to be your Valentine this time around, Marinette said. Adrien whined at her for bringing up his mistake that turned out to be, the best thing in his entire life. As per usual, she laughed and patted his cheek affectionately. Nino and Alia laughed at their display, and then took the liberty of being the first couple to walk through the fair gates right after handing in their admission tickets. Adrien handed his and Marinette's to the ticket volunteer, earning a sweetened "Have fun" from the volunteer. The fair wasn't crazy packed just yet. There were hordes of young kids milling around and buzzed with excitement. Clearly, this was their first time doing something with their friends and not their parents. Adrien completely understood the wonder and excitement. Looking around, it seemed to be that the only real couples and real high schoolers that were there at the time were, in fact, them. So what are we planning on doing today? Adrien asked. The cotton candy and pretzel booth first, because we have to get something before they run out or when the wait time is like 30 minutes, Alia said, tugging Nino towards the brightly colored booths, just getting started to serve the popular treats. Well, I'm thinking we can go on the Ferris wheel or the merry-go-round, Marinette said quietly and happily to him. Adrien nodded. He liked that idea, but in truth, he wanted to give her the card first. It was really the only thing he had yet to give her. Just that morning she had given her a box of chocolates, homemade macaroons that he had conspired with her parents to bake, 14 white roses, which were the first type she had actually truly accepted from him, and an instant print-off camera, because, well, it was Marinette. She liked taking pictures. By her speechless reaction alone, he knew she loved the gift, and it made his heart bounce and do flips when she kissed him as thanks. The card was supposed to be part of the bundle. However, he was unable to make himself hand it to her with the rest of the gifts. The other gifts were, and might he say it, perfect. The card was anything but that. Plus, he'd much rather have her be one of the few people to see it rather than also have any onlookers at school who happened to pass by also glance by. Totally. Let's go on the Ferris wheel at the end of the night when it gets darker. I know how much you like the sunset, Adrien said. Marinette's face melted and she squeezed his arm. You know me so well. I sometimes don't even know how to react, she said with a smile. He kissed her on the top of the head and then pulled her to join their friends in line. "If I fall," Marinette warned as they neared the front of the line to enter the Ferris wheel carriage. "Catch me." Adrien laughed and squeezed her hand. "I have always done so. Have you lost faith in me?" he teased. Marinette wrinkled her nose and turned away. "I'm serious. I fell last time," she pointed out. "And I caught you then, didn't I?" Adrien's rebuttal was one she could not argue with. "Promise?" Marinette said sternly, as if she needed to double-check. Adrien laughed and leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Promise." True to his word, he helped her into the carriage and held her hand tight, and, for the first time ever, she didn't trip. The achievement brought a large and bright smile on her face, and as she sat down, she was very clearly proud of her lack of clumsiness. With a sigh, Adrien looked at the sun as it dipped into the earth, flooding the sky with gorgeous colors, swirling into beautiful rays. "It's beautiful," he commented. Marinette hummed in agreement and rested her head on his shoulder. It never got old to him how her head seemed to be at the perfect level to do so, and how it seemed so perfectly natural to rest his head atop of hers. "It definitely is," Marinette said. "Though your eyes beat it by kilometers," she said decidedly. Adrien raised an eyebrow. Not that she could see it, though. "Really?" He was unconvinced. "Of course. I have no uncertainties about that," she said. Adrien hummed. "I should have been the one to say that, right?" he asked. Marinette scoffed. "Compliments don't have genders," she commented firmly. That made Adrien snort. "We're literally French," he said in a dry tone of voice. "I know, but that's not the point," Marinette said, probably rolling her eyes. With a laugh, Adrien reached his hand that wasn't draped around Marinette's waist to grab the card from inside his pocket. "Hey," he said, making her lift her head to look at him with those big, blue, beautiful eyes. "I have another Valentine's gift for you," he said. A grin broke out on her face. "Me too," she said. "It's a card, so it might not be great," Adrien said, hiding his wince. It was not going to be great. Like, at all. Marinette laughed. "Mine is also a card. Wow, we're so in sync," Marinette said with a laugh. "Actually, that's not new or a surprise." Adrien was about halfway through surprised and halfway through not. For one, Marinette had given him a huge basket of baked goods filled to the brim with overflowing and delicious treats this morning. She and her family were currently indulging him in a way that was dangerous to his model managers. Truthfully, though, he really didn't care. That wasn't all she had given him, though. She also gave him the softest and puffiest stuffed cat. It had big green eyes and a black coat, just like him. She had also given him a box of chocolate. The only difference was that she had, actually made the truffles herself. Adrien did not want to hand make his because it was just asking for pure disasters, and baking macaroons was already so chaotic he wasn't going to continue poking the bear. On the other hand, Marinette had always been the type to give and give and give some more. He didn't expect her to give him a card after the spectacular gift from this morning, but it wasn't a shock. That was who she was. She continued to do more than necessary, and it just made him fall in love with her a little bit more, if that was somehow possible still. Taking in a breath, Adrien pulled the card into view and held it out. At the same time, they exchanged cards, and it was an understatement to say that they were shocked. Marinette's eyebrows were raised high from the second her eyes spotted the picture. In an instant, she bit her lip. stifling a laugh for long enough to read what was inscribed on it. Adrien, however, was shocked for a totally different reason. The card she had given him was the Ladybug and Chat Noir Valentines card he had tried to buy her just a week before. How did she get her hands on it? Idly, his mind flew back to Nino's shock when he had managed to snag the card just the day before Valentine's. Truly, it was an inconceivable feat. "Oh my goodness," Marinette said, letting out twinkling laughs. "How did you find this?" Adrien blurted out. "I asked them for this a week ago and they were out. How did you get the last one?" he asked in an incredulous voice. Marinette nodded but was very clearly preoccupied with the god-cursed picture. Yeah, they said I got lucky and I said, believe me, I am, but oh my goodness, what is this? It's marvelous, she said with bellows, hand over her mouth. Adrien whined and pouted, attempting to snatch away the card but to no avail. Still, Marinette put a hand on his cheek to console him, but her hand was shaking with laughter. "I love it, don't get me wrong, but oh my goodness, why do my pigtails look like blobs?" she asked. Adrien couldn't keep suppressing his own smile, so he tucked the card away in his pocket and leaned close to look at the mess he called a card. "I tried. Clearly. I love it. Despite the tornado you made of your own hair. Why does your hair look like that?" "I didn't realize how awful I was at drawing until after I finished it." I draw enough for the both of us." With that, Plagg and Tiki decided to make their appearances, and the former with a terrible smirk on his face. "It's a mess," he stated. "It's sweet," Tiki argued. Marinette and Adrien turned towards each other and laughed. "I love it," she said, kissing him on the cheek. Adrien smiled widely too. "I like yours as well, even if it ruined my plans of giving this card to you every year," he admitted. Marinette laughed. "You have next year," she told him. Adrien snorted. "If you don't get there first, at least." She shut him up with a kiss. A proper one. And he didn't complain at all. Plagg, however, did. "Bleh, that's horrible." "Plagg!" On a quick side note, this is one of the most adorable stories I've ever written. And, yeah.